Your brain does this thing when two truths collide at short circuits, searching desperately for a reality where both can exist. My blind date walked through that door, and I had exactly 3 seconds to reconcile two impossible facts. This woman could ruin my life, and I'd never wanted anyone more. Let me tell you about the moment everything I'd carefully constructed started to collapse. I'm Brandon, 29, and I'd spent 2 years engineering the perfect emotional fortress. Marketing analyst by day, where I crushed quarterly targets and delivered presentations with the precision of a surgeon. Minimalist apartment by night, all clean lines and expensive emptiness. My life was a controlled experiment where the only variable was me, and I'd eliminated every element that could introduce chaos. There's a psychological term for what I was doing to avoid coping. After my 3-year relationship ended in mutual emotional exhaustion, I decided that control was safer than connection. No vulnerability meant no destruction. It also meant no feeling, but I convinced myself that was the price of peace. Then Brian from Marketing Optimistic, Relentless Brian, decided I needed saving. He ambushed me in the break room with his signature grin and a blind date proposition I should have refused instantly. "Trust me," he said, like those aren't the 2 words that precede every disaster. But here's the thing about loneliness. It's patient. It waits until you're standing in your perfect apartment at 11 p.m., surrounded by things that cost too much and mean too little, before it whispers that maybe you're not actually fine. So I agreed. 1 blind date. 2 hours max, controlled environment, easy exit strategy. Friday evening found me at an upscale lounge on the west side, dim lighting, leather booths, jazz that sounded expensive. I positioned myself at a corner table with clear sight lines to the entrance, ordered whiskey neat, and waited for a stranger who would be polite enough for conversation and forgettable enough to confirm my choices were correct. Then the door opened, and my amygdala, that primitive part of your brain that processes threats and desire before conscious thought can interfere, lit up like a warning flare. She moved through the room with the kind of confidence that doesn't apologize for existing. Dark hair, elegant ponytail, black sweater with white detailing that suggested someone who made deliberate choices about everything. Her eyes swept the space and landed on mine with recognition that hit like a physical force. Tanya, David's ex-wife, my best friend of 15 years. The guy I'd stood beside as best man 5 years ago, celebrating a marriage that looked perfect until it wasn't. 6 months ago, their divorce had been the kind of spectacular implosion that forced everyone in their orbit to choose sides or disappear entirely. And now she was walking toward me, and every neuron in my brain was screaming contradictory instructions. Run. Stay. This is wrong. This feels right. You'll lose everything. You've already lost everything that matters. I had 3 seconds before she reached my table. 3 seconds to decide if I was the kind of man who played it safe or the kind who was willing to burn his entire life down for something that might actually be real. My life runs on schedules and spreadsheets. Monday through Friday, I'm in the office by 7:30 a.m., espresso in hand, inbox already half cleared from the night before. Client presentations at 9, strategy sessions at 11, lunch meetings where I order the salmon and pretend to care about someone's golf handicap. I've mastered the art of looking engaged while my mind calculates conversion rates and quarterly projections. By 6 p.m., I'm back in my apartment, all clean lines and neutral tones, the kind of place that photographs well, but doesn't feel like anyone actually lives there. I heat up whatever meal prep I made on Sunday, answer emails from the couch, stream something I won't remember, then fall asleep scrolling through my phone. Rinse and repeat. You need to get out more, Brian told me last Tuesday, leaning against my cubicle with that persistent grin he always wears. When's the last time you did something spontaneous? Spontaneous doesn't close deals, I said, not looking up from my screen. Come on, man. 1 blind date. She's smart, successful, exactly your type. I've been dodging Brian's matchmaking attempts for weeks. He meant well, but the last thing I needed was another relationship that looked perfect on paper and felt empty in practice. My ex-girlfriend taught me that lesson thoroughly for 3 years of trying to force something that was never really there. ending in a breakup that was more relief than heartbreak. Not interested, I told him. But Brian doesn't take no for an answer. By Friday afternoon, he'd worn me down with a combination of persistence and guilt. Just drinks. 2 hours. If it's awful, you never have to listen to me again. So there I was Friday evening, standing in my closet, debating between the navy blazer and the charcoal gray. I chose the gray, checked my reflection twice, and drove downtown with my jaw clenched and my expectations at zero. The lounge appeared ahead, amber light spilling onto the sidewalk like a warning. The whiskey in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. Tanya stood at the entrance, scanning the room, and when her eyes found mine, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe recognition, definitely not retreat. She wore a black sweater with white geometric detailing that somehow managed to be both casual and deliberate. Her dark hair pulled back to reveal the kind of bone structure that makes you forget whatever you were about to say. Her smile was warm but controlled, like she'd already decided how this would go. I knew that smile. I'd seen it at David's wedding 5 years ago when she laughed at his best man speech. I'd seen it at countless group dinners back when we all pretended our lives were stable and our friendships permanent. Then came a divorce 6 months ago, sudden, messy, and wrapped in a kind of silence that meant everyone had chosen sides without saying so. David got bitter and distant. Tanya disappeared completely. Nobody asked questions because questions required acknowledging the wreckage. Now she was walking toward my table like she had every right to be here. "Brandon," she said, her voice steady. "This is unexpected." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to text Brian some excuse and disappear before this became complicated. But my body refused to move. We could pretend we didn't see each other, I offered weakly. Tanya slid into the booth across from me, her eyes never leaving mine. We could acknowledge that we're both adults who can have one drink without the world ending. The bartender appeared. She ordered a martini, dry, with a twist. Confidence. Specific. Nothing like the woman I remembered hovering at the edges of David's stories. We talked. About work, she'd started her own consulting firm. About the city, how it had changed, how we'd both changed. The conversation flowed with an ease that felt dangerous, intellectual sparring, mixed with something I couldn't name, but definitely felt. Then Tanya leaned forward, her gaze sharp and direct. "Are we really doing this? Or are we just pretending this isn't absolutely insane?" "I think we both know this is insane," I said, but I didn't stand up to leave. Tanya's fingers traced the rim of her martini glass. "David and I haven't spoken in 4 months. Our marriage ended long before the paperwork made it official. He's still my oldest friend, or was." The past tense felt like admitting something I hadn't fully processed. "I'm not asking you to choose sides," she said quietly. "I'm asking if you want to see me again, knowing exactly how complicated it is." The smart answer was no. The safe answer was to finish my drink, wish her well, and pretend this never happened. Instead, I heard myself say, "There's a gallery opening next Friday. Contemporary art, wine, the kind of pretentious thing I usually avoid." Her smile was slow and devastating. "I love pretentious art." We exchanged numbers like we were defusing a bomb, carefully, aware of the weight of what we were doing. Later that night, Brian texted, "So, how'd it go?" I stared at the screen, debating how much to say. It was complicated. "Did you know she used to be married to David?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. "Wait, David? You're David? Holy shit, man. I had no idea." My contact just said she was recently single and amazing. "Do you want me to?" "No," I typed back. "It's fine. It's handled." But it wasn't fine. I sat on my couch in my too-perfect apartment, staring at Tanya's name in my phone like it was evidence of a crime I was planning to commit. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was a betrayal, that loyalty meant walking away. But another part that had felt something genuine for the first time in years refused to listen. Friday evening arrived like a deadline. I walked into the gallery, heart pounding, scanning the crowd for a woman in black. I found her standing in front of an abstract piece of chaotic splashes of red and black that looked like controlled violence. She wore deep burgundy this time, her hair down in waves that caught the gallery lighting. "What do you see?" she asked without turning around. "Expensive chaos," I said. "Something someone will pay too much for to prove they understand it." She laughed, genuine and unguarded. Cynical. I like it. We moved through the gallery together, trading observations that became conversations that became something else entirely. Well, I made a sarcastic comment about the sculptor's dialogue with negative space. She touched my arm, and the contact felt electric. "Can I tell you something?" Tanya said, her voice dropping lower. David needed someone to manage, not someone to love. I was a project, a variable in his life equation. That sounds exhausting. It was suffocating. Her eyes held mine. I spent 5 years making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I'm done shrinking. The gallery closed around us, and we didn't notice until the curator started dimming the lights. Outside, the city hummed with Friday night energy. We walked without destination, past bars spilling laughter onto sidewalks, through streets lined with old brownstones. "What do you actually want, Brandon?" she asked. "Not what looks good on paper. What makes you feel alive?" The question hit harder than it should have. I don't know anymore. I built this perfect life, and it feels like living in a museum. "So break something," she said simply. We stopped outside her modern, glass-fronted building, nothing like the life she described leaving behind. She turned to face me, and the invitation in her eyes was unmistakable. "This is the point where we stop pretending this is just friendly," she said. I kissed her, slow at first, then deeper, her hands sliding up to my neck, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Morning light filtered through Tanya's floor-to-ceiling windows, turning her bedroom into something out of a dream I wasn't ready to wake from. She was curled against me, her breathing soft and even, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then my phone started buzzing on the nightstand. David's name flashed across the screen. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Tanya stirred. "You should probably get that." "It's nothing," I lied, silencing the phone. But it wasn't nothing. The calls kept coming, each vibration a small detonation of anxiety in my chest. Does he know? How could he know? We'd been careful, hadn't we? The paranoia crept in like smoke under a door, poisoning the perfect morning we'd built. "It's David, isn't it?" Tanya sat up, pulling the sheet around her shoulders. "I'll handle it," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I drove home in yesterday's clothes, my phone burning a hole in my pocket. For missed calls, 6 texts, all variations of "call me back." I ignored them, but the dread wrapped around my ribs like a vice. By afternoon, my phone rang again. Marcus, a mutual friend from our college days. "Hey man, weird question," he said, his tone too casual. "Were you at that gallery opening on 3rd Street last night? Could have sworn I saw you with someone who looked a lot like Tanya." My stomach dropped. "Just networking," I said automatically. "Right, networking." The pause was loaded. "Listen, if there's something you need to tell David." I ended the call. Seconds later, my phone lit up with a text that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk. Now." David knew, and from the tone, he was already building the firing squad. I walked into Murphy's with my jaw already clenched. Our regular booth in the back corner felt like walking into an ambush. David sat there with 3 empty beer bottles lined up like ammunition, his face flushed and hard in a way I'd never seen before. "You couldn't even call me back," he said before I'd fully sat down. His voice was loud enough that heads turned. Had to hear it from Marcus. From fucking Marcus. "David, let me explain." "Explain what?" He slammed his hand on the table. "That you're screwing my ex-wife? That my best friend, my best man waited, what, 6 months? To move in on her." The accusation hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm. "It wasn't like that. We didn't plan this." "Bullshit." His laugh was bitter, ugly. "You know what kills me? All those years you stood next to me. My wedding. Every time I complained about my marriage falling apart. And you were just waiting for your chance. That's not true, and you know it." "Do I?" He leaned forward, eyes bloodshot and mean. "Tell me right now you'll end it. Tell me she means nothing and we can forget this happened." The entire bar seemed to hold its breath. I could feel eyes on us, conversations dying around us. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not ending it." Something shifted in David's face, surprise giving way to pure rage. He stood up so fast his chair scraped loud against the floor. "Then we're done. You're dead to me." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Every mutual friend. Everyone at that precious firm of yours. I'll burn it all down." He threw cash on the table and walked out, leaving me alone with the wreckage of a 15-year friendship scattered across beer-stained wood. Monday morning felt like walking through a minefield. The usual greetings in the hallway died when I approached. Brian avoided eye contact at the coffee machine. In the strategy meeting, when I presented the quarterly projections, the silence that followed felt pointed, uncomfortable. At lunch, Sarah from accounting, someone I'd barely spoken to in 3 years, made a comment about loyalty that landed like a grenade in the middle of casual conversation. People were talking. David had made good on his threat. By Wednesday, my boss pulled me aside. "Is everything okay, Brandon? I've been hearing some personal matters might be affecting team dynamics." "It's handled," I lied, but we both knew it wasn't. I left work early, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I got to Tanya's apartment. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Talk to me," she said softly. Everything came spilling out, the whispers at work, the strained meetings, the way friendships I'd built over years were crumbling because David was weaponizing our past. "I lost him," I said, my voice breaking, "and he's trying to destroy my reputation. Everything I've built." Tanya's hands framed my face, forcing me to look at her. "You didn't lose him, Brandon. He showed you who he really was. Someone who'd rather burn everything down than let me be happy. Then let you be happy." I pulled her close, breathing her in, trying to anchor myself to something solid. Then came the knock. Aggressive, insistent. 3 hard pounds that made us both freeze. "Tanya." David's voice carried through the door, sharp and furious. "I know he's in there. Open the door." Tanya's body went rigid in my arms. I felt her heart hammering against my chest as we stood there, trapped between the wreckage of the past and whatever came next. Tanya pulled away from me, her jaw set. "Stay here," she said, but I followed her to the door anyway. She opened it to reveal David, disheveled and wild-eyed, still in his work clothes, but looking like he hadn't slept in days. He pushed past her without invitation, his eyes landing on me with pure hatred. "So it's true. You're actually doing this." "You need to leave," Tanya said, her voice steel. "Leave? This is my life you're destroying. My friendships. You're what?" Tanya cut him off, something unleashing in her voice I'd never heard before. "Your property? Because that's what I was to you, wasn't it? You controlled every part of me. What I wore, who I saw, how I spoke. You made me small so you could feel big. You're not angry about loyalty, David. You're angry that someone chose me." David's face went red. "That's bullshit. I gave you everything. You gave me a cage with expensive furniture," she shot back. He turned to me, finger pointed like a weapon. "And you were supposed to be my brother." Something broke loose in my chest. "I'm not asking for your blessing," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I'm telling you I choose her, and I choose myself. Your anger doesn't define my life anymore." "You ungrateful," David lunged forward. I stepped between him and Tanya. "Don't." For a moment, we stood there, 2 men who'd shared everything, now facing each other across an unbridgeable divide. I could see it in his eyes, the rage, the possessiveness, the desperate need to control what he'd already lost. "Get out," Tanya said, her phone already in her hand. "Or I'm calling the police." David's jaw worked, his hands clenched into fists. Then he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Silence crashed over us like a wave. Tanya's hands trembled as she locked the door. Then something broke inside her, years of holding everything together, of making herself smaller, of swallowing her truth. She slid down against the wall, and the sobs came hard and raw. I sat beside her, pulling her close. "You didn't break anything," I said into her hair. "You freed us both." We stayed there on the floor until the shaking stopped, until the tears ran dry, until the weight of what we just done settled into something we could carry together. "No more hiding," she said finally. No more hiding, I agreed. The months that followed weren't easy. Some friendships dissolved. My position at work became complicated enough that I started exploring other opportunities. But something shifted. I stopped measuring my worth by quarterly reports and started measuring it by Sunday mornings with Tanya, by conversations that lasted until 3 a.m., by the consulting business we built together from her dining room table. She launched her firm in October. I quit my job in December. We created traditions that were ours: Thursday night cooking experiments, Saturday morning runs through the park, late night drives with no destination. My apartment stopped feeling like a museum. Her place became ours. One evening in March, my phone buzzed. David's name flashed across the screen with a preview of another threatening message. I watched it for a moment, then deleted it without reading past the first few words. Everything okay? Tanya asked from across the room, surrounded by client proposals and coffee cups. I used to think losing everything meant failure. Now I know it meant letting go of everything that was keeping me small: the perfect apartment, the polished life, the friendship built on who I used to be instead of who I wanted to become. Tanya smiled at me, genuine and unguarded, and I realized I hadn't lost anything. I'd finally found everything.